Today we have California Congresswoman and a former vice presidential contender, Karen Bass. I know today's been a little hectic, so thanks so much for coming on.
Sure, happy to be here.
So we're recording this on Saturday. You just came back from a vote on the $25 billion USPS bill. Can you tell us about that bill and what it includes?
Sure. Well, we're not finished voting on the bill. We just voted on it, part of it. But basically, the bill provides $25 billion for the post office, but it also tells the postmaster he needs to rectify the damage that he's already done. So removing the blue boxes, taking out the sorting machines, he needs to put them back. And so those are the main components of this bill. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the president said he would welcome and he would sign a standalone bill. The $25 billion is what the post office has requested. So he said he would sign a standalone bill, but one never knows what the president's going to do from 1 minute to the next, because now he's talking about vetoing the bill. So who knows?
Have you heard from any Republicans that they're signaling support for this bill?
You know, I've not personally talked to Republicans, but I know there will be Republican support for this bill because the post office is in Republican districts as well. And especially some of my Republican colleagues who represent rural areas, you know, where Amazon, UPS, FedEx might not get there, they're dependent on the post office. The post office is also where hundreds of thousands of veterans get their medications, and many other people do as well. It's the number one employer of veterans. So everyone has something at stake with the post office.
Right. And I do want to talk about those Republicans who don't come on board. I mean, changes to this postal service, like you said, they impact everyone, but it's a disproportionate impact on rural areas, which are Republican areas. I mean, like you said, you can't find a CVS on every corner in Appalachia, right? Like you can't find a UPS or FedEx. You even hear about farmers who are having their chicks die on the way to hatcheries by the thousands. So how are those Republicans deferring to Trump over their own constituents here? Or is the allure of voter suppression just too strong?
Let me just tell you that that's been the question for the last 3.5 years. I mean, my Republican colleagues have taken many, many votes that directly hurt their constituents. The question to me is, how do they get away with it? That's the question of the hour. They choose to obey Trump versus serve their constituents.
So we saw during the Senate hearing with DeJoy that he's not going to give in easily. He lied and said that his changes are intended to make the Postal Service more efficient. And look, I'm no logistics genius like DeJoy, but mandating that letter carriers can't finish their routes and cutting overtime and blocking extra trips that were used to ensure that the mail is delivered doesn't seem like it's going to make anything more efficient, right? It seems like it's going to delay the mail.
The president has been hostile to the post office for the last 3.5 years. So part of this is nothing new. It's just that the acceleration of the attacks on the post office is absolutely related to the upcoming election. And so he did backtrack because of public outcry. This is why public outcry is so important. He did back away and he said he would do the other efficiency measures after the election.
When he comes to testify for the House, what do you hope to see your Democratic colleagues accomplish? Because, I mean, like I said, we've already seen that he's more than willing to lie to the Democratic senators.
Well, I think that they need to hold him accountable for what he said on Friday. So let's see if he changes it. Maybe his story will change. Maybe he will decide to be more truthful. But, you know, this is what happens when you put someone who is essentially your donor with no background in the post office, no background in this area at all, but you put him there because he's your political supporter so that he will then do what needs to happen to make sure you get reelected.
Right. So something that a lot of people are struggling with right now is a feeling that there won't be any accountability for DeJoy, that Democrats are always playing catch up and just trying to stop the bleeding and that nothing actually happens to these people. So can you speak to that?
Well, yes, I can speak to it. Now, in terms of nothing happening to him, I don't know what people are referring to. They want him to be arrested. They want him to be put in jail. They want him to be fired. He is an appointee of the president. We do not have the power or the authority over that. One thing that I think is very important, and I do this with my constituents in Los Angeles all the time, and that is explain how the process and how the system works. So people might believe that Congress has more power than we do in terms of why don't you just fire the Postmaster General? Well, we can't fire the Postmaster General. But all of those things, I feel it's my responsibility to explain to people what it is we can do and what it is we can't do. But here's what everybody can do. Everybody can vote in the next 70 plus days. And if we have a new president, we wouldn't be having this discussion. If we are left with this guy for 4 more years, we haven't seen anything yet.
So actually, I mean, this seems like a good opportunity to kind of give you the floor and kind of speak to my viewers and listeners about the different ways that we have that we can vote effectively and safely.
Well, one of the most important things is that if you come from a state that has early voting, the minute you get that ballot, if you can, please send it in right away. Because even though we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this is not the latest tactic to suppress the votes, mail it in early so then there cannot be an excuse. That's one of the most important things. The other thing is that in this COVID environment where we have all learned the word Zoom, you can Zoom with your friends and family around the country and make sure that everybody understands how to vote in your particular state. Voting is controlled on a state and a county level. And so we have to make sure that everyone knows what is appropriate in your area. You can't wait until November 2nd to figure out how to vote. It might be too late. So the minute early voting starts, get that ballot, send it in, do a Zoom call with your friends and families from around the country and make sure everyone is prepared. And by the way, while you're doing that, fill out your census form if you haven't done that already.
So speaking to that point, I do know that, there has been attacks by Trump on like you said, just allowing people to vote by mail in the first place. They've started attacking drop boxes. They've instituted voter ID laws. In Florida, we're seeing basically what's akin to a poll tax by undermining the Amendment 4 that passed in the last election. Louis DeJoy has tripled the price of postage for ballots. Now Trump's threatening to deploy troops to polling stations. So first of all, is that legal, and what's being done to stop it?
Well, first of all, this is so sad. I mean, I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and this is the kind of thing that happens in other countries that the U.S. is always so critical about. So the only reason why you would send out troops to a polling station is to scare people.
Right.
This is something that was done in California to very specifically frighten immigrants, because at the same time that they send in the police, they also will tell you if you vote incorrectly, you might get sent to jail. So in other places, it's done to intimidate Black voters. And they have sent Black voters to jail for making mistakes. And so we have to push back on a local level and say we are not going to allow this to happen. But you know what? If they do send the troops, we again have to educate people to say, you go in and you vote anyway. You're not breaking the law. This is your constitutional right. This is a free country. So you just walk right past those troops.
So let's talk about the vice presidential nominating process. You were on the short list to serve as VP. It's my understanding that the questionnaire that you fill out is pretty intrusive. So obviously, I don't expect you to divulge any of your answers. But can you give an example or two of the kind of questions that you're asked that surprised you?
Sure. You're asked for your taxes. You're asked for where you've worked. I mean, they're basic questions that you would be asked going for any job. But I will tell you that it was an incredible honor to have been considered. The women were up for the job, all prepared, we're all amazing. The person that got the job, my junior senator, California, Kamala Harris, very excited, very proud. Her make her speech the other night and introduce herself to the country. So I think we're in great shape with our ticket. I'm excited. I have been Zooming every day, campaigning, making sure that in 70 plus days, we will get some relief. And it's not just that we owe it to the country, we frankly owe it to the world to correct the mistake that was done in 2016.
So because Kamala Harris is the VP nominee, there's suddenly an opening for a Senate seat in California that Governor Newsom has to fill. Are you on the short list for that?
There is no list. I have so much empathy for my governor right now because aside from the fact that he did everything right around COVID, we've still had a spike. And in the
Yeah.
middle of having a spike on COVID, he's dealing with over 60 wildfires. So the last thing he's thinking about is an appointment that he will have to make in January. So I'm not bothering him. We will see what happens. There might be other opportunities out there. And so we'll just pray for California and see what happens.
Well, the last thing I want to ask you about is Joe Biden's speech at the convention. So Trump had spent weeks claiming that Joe Biden wouldn't even remember his own name, that he'd be lucky if he didn't just walk up to the podium and start drooling, right? Like, obviously that's not what happened. He blew it out of the water. Could you tell us what chapter in Art of the Deal is lowering the bar to the ocean floor and basically ensuring victory for your opponent?
I mean, what we know we're going to see next week at the Republican convention is going to be a replay of 1968 with George Wallace, a open, avowed white racist, white supremacist who ran a campaign of fear, of race and violence and law and order. And we're going to see a repeat of that campaign. So it's going to be resurrecting the ghost of George Wallace. I thought Vice President Biden, soon to be President Biden, did a wonderful job. And I think one of the most important things that came across from the Democratic convention all 4 days was that the Democratic Party cares about people. 170,000 Americans have perished in the last 4 months. The first job of the commander-in-chief is to protect his people. And this commander-in-chief hasn't the capacity to be empathetic for the souls that have been lost. And I think that soon to be President Biden communicated empathy and concern and commitment that we have not seen in the last 3.5 years.
And to that point, I mean, the part that's going to make it so difficult for Trump is that this isn't a new thing for him, right? Like, he's had over 7 months to do any of the things required to get this virus under control. And yet still in August, we don't have a nationwide testing or contact tracing system. We didn't have enough PPE. We never advocated for stay-at-home orders. We have no nationwide mask mandate. All of the things that he could have done to help himself, basically, in the next election to get this virus under control, he hasn't done. And yet he's had plenty of time to destroy the constitutionally enshrined post office.
But, why would we be surprised? He has never expressed any concern for the American people at all. He doesn't even have concern for his own supporters, which is why he wanted them all congregated in a stadium. And one of his main supporters died as a consequence of it. Did he even say anything? After Herman Cain died, maybe he tweeted something, but he does not have the capacity to have empathy. And that is a serious problem. That to me disqualifies him for the job. And we have paid the consequences over 3.5 years for the vote that we took in 2016. We have 70 plus days to rectify the situation. And I'm confident that the American people will do this, will correct it, which is why they're trying to go to such extraordinary measures to cheat, because they know that's the only way they could win.
Well, that seems like a good place than any to end this. So, Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for yours.